Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 1 tight end starter sets for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about my top 12 tight ends on the week, as well as talking about the matchups who I think are going to be most advantageous for the tight end position. So before we get into today's video, let me remind all of you who haven't yet already, click that subscribe button. And I want to thank all of you who have already joined the community. I want you guys to be like Tyron Smith today and pancake block that subscribe button, join the community, click that notification bell button to know when my latest video is out, know when I'm live streaming. And yes, there will be a live stream later today for those of you who are interested as well. Down in the description, the link to my Patreon is there for those of you who are interested in getting all of your 2019 fantasy football questions answered, whether it's flex, starter, sits, just curious about something in terms of fantasy football, NFL. If you got a personal question, you can send it to me there. But I got my rankings. I have everything on a weekly basis there on my Patreon, as well as private live streams. For those of you who are interested, go down in the description. The link is down there for those. All right. So, hey, everybody. How's it going? We're talking about tight ends today. And yes, it's Thursday. And you may have already seen my quarterback video. And yes, this is all being recorded in one day, but this is going to be really fun. The tight end position is pretty straightforward. I mean, let's be honest. There really hasn't been much talent at the tight end position outside of a top 5 or 6 at the position in the last couple of years. Truly, Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz have been the mainstay elite plays at the position. We've seen some glimpses of Kittle last year, Ebron, Jared Cook. A couple of years back, Kyle Rudolph was decent. But really, they're just, Gronkowski in seasons past, Jimmy Graham in seasons past. But really, we've come down to an area where it's pretty young, and the depth at the tight end position is not great. But we're going to try to figure out, we're going to try to come up with a top 12 that I'm really confident in. And I really do believe this is the top 12 tight ends and the top 12 tight ends of the week. And you're going to find that to be something very similar as we move on. These top 12 guys are going to be reoccurring on the weekly episodes because really there isn't much else better than these guys at the moment. So before we get into today's video, let's talk about the matchups at the tight end position. Now, what team gave up the most points to the tight end position last season was the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, before we begin, there's always a potential that Nick Foles finds his tight end this coming week and finds some value there with the Jacksonville Jaguars. As well, who gave up the least points to the tight end position? That would be the Buffalo Bills, Tennessee Titans, Arizona Cardinals, etc. But really, this is just to give you guys a pretty good basis of, in half-point PPR scoring formats, how many points opposing defenses gave to the tight end position on a weekly basis. Or defenses gave to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis. But either way, you could pause this, look at it, do whatever you'd like. But we're going to go and we're going to talk about my number 1 tight end on the week. Is it a surprise? Is it a surprise that Travis Kelce is my number 1 tight end? It shouldn't be. Travis Kelce will probably be my number 1 tight end almost every single week unless it is an extremely difficult match. If he plays against the Chargers, I don't want to play Travis Kelce. In his career, he hasn't been great against the Chargers. You can go look at it. The game logs are there. You can go to Pro Football Reference. You can go find it, okay? Plain and simple. But typically, I'm going to start Travis Kelce as my number 1 tight end on a weekly basis. The guy's just too good. His quarterback combination is great. And I can't move away from it. There's not really much to talk about this. Last time he played against the Jaguars last season, I think he broke over 100 receiving yards, had about 6-7 receptions. The guy's fine. He's going to be as good as he is as advertised. And I love Travis Kelce as my number 1 tight end, and there's nothing to stop that. So plain and simple, he's my number 1, and we're going to move on from that. Moving on to my number 2 tight end of the week, George Kittle, playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. The real question is whether or not George Kittle and the combination of him and Jimmy Garoppolo are going to be as good as, what Kittle had to deal with last season. Obviously, having backup quarterbacks throw you the ball isn't, what you're looking for at the tight end position or in any fantasy prospects position, but hopefully Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle against a very weak defense can find their connection and will be the number 2 tight end on the season or on the week. Excuse me. What am I doing? Here's the thing. The way I see it, Jimmy Garoppolo isn't the best quarterback. Comparatively to Patrick Mahomes or even below him to Carson Wentz, I don't trust Jimmy Garoppolo as much. But I really do believe George Kittle, from what we saw last season, is an extremely important part of this offense. They want to use one tight end, maybe even two tight end sets very often because of the fact that they have Kyle Juszczyk and the plethora of running backs. They need a tight end in there that can also block. Kittle's not coming off the field. He's a fantastic blocker, and he is their number one receiving option on this team. He's my number 2 in a great matchup, plain and simple, fire him up. Moving on to number 3, Zach Ertz, the security blanket of Carson Wentz, plain and simple. Yes, Zach Ertz, he broke the record for the most receptions by a tight end last season with like 116. He broke Jason Witten's record. That's why Jason Witten came out of retirement. He's like, how dare these children. I'm coming back from the ESPN booth to, I'm going to win. Okay, relax, Witten. But Zach Ertz, plain and simple, one of the top 3 elite tight ends into a great matchup against the Washington Redskins, who are going to struggle against him. I cannot see, it's going to be a great week. For these 3 guys, it's going to be fantastic. Fire these guys up. They could literally be interchanged. One can, Zach Ertz could be the number 1, Travis Kelce be 3. Doesn't matter. We all know we're starting these guys because we drafted them so early, and we know that they are top tier receiving options. They're not just tight ends. They're wide receivers in a tight end body that are getting put into your fantasy slot at the tight end position, which is a steal. So moving on, let's talk about my number 4 tight end on the week, O.J. Howard of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Similar to George Kittle, this matchup, it's going to be high scoring. Their defenses are absolutely atrocious. Now, here's the thing. O.J. Howard, especially for those of you who got my 2019 draft kit, will know O.J. Howard was such a good tight end last year. In the, 7 or 8, in the 11 games that he played last season, he had 9 tight end 1 performances. The guy, every time he is on the field, whether it was Ryan Fitzpatrick or Jameis Winston, is a top-tier tight end. He is a great tight end. Sure, Cameron Brate is sitting around the corner trying to take reps, trying to take targets, but I'm not worried about that. O.J. Howard is all around the better tight end in terms of receiving and blocking, and that's why he's going to be on the field majority of the time. You don't have to worry about Adam Humphries or Deshaun Jackson taking away targets. It's going to be Evans, Godwin, and then O.J. Howard as the number 3 receiving option on this team into a great matchup in week 1, a bigger target. And to be honest, he's going to have a good week. I love him at my number 4 spot. Fire him up. Moving on to number 5, Evan Engram, a guy that in the PPR format is going to be a nightmare for opposing defenses and opposing fantasy prospects that don't have Evan Engram on their team. Plain and simple, when Evan Engram is in this lineup, Eli Manning is just going to heavily target him. There's no more Odell Beckham. Sterling Shepard's going to be blanketed by corners that are far better than him in terms of talent. Sure, Saquon is a receiving option, but Evan Engram might even surpass Saquon Barkley in terms of targets this coming season. You never know. Evan Engram, I have a lot of confidence in him playing against the Dallas Cowboys. I know the Cowboys, they have good linebackers. Van Der Esch, Jalen Smith, Sean Lee, they can cover. But I really do believe that the speed of Evan Engram is something you just can't match up with. And he's gonna be pretty good this week. He's my number 5 tight end. Moving on to number 6, we have Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry missed the entirety of last season due to an ACL injury. And the plain, cold hard facts is we don't know what kind of Hunter Henry we're going to see. We might see a shell of himself, but from what I'm expecting, from what I've seen through preseason and especially through scrimmages and practices from Hunter Henry, he is full speed go. He had one of the fastest turnarounds in terms of an ACL reconstruction and rehab entire process. The guy was suiting up for the Patriots game in the playoffs last year when he tore his ACL in July. From July to January, the dude turned it around and was ready to go. Hunter Henry is a miracle when it comes to an ACL turnaround like that. And to be honest, the way that Phillip Rivers is going to heavily target this guy, because we know Phillip Rivers, Antonio Gates, he lit him up with targets, especially in the red zone. Hunter Henry is just the next step in that evolution of the tight end position for the Chargers. We've seen him be very successful in seasons past, 2017 specifically. And I cannot wait to see what Hunter Henry's capable of in 2019. He's going to have a good week against the Indianapolis Colts in week 1. Should be great. All right, moving on to my number 7. So the Houston Texans, like we saw a little bit earlier. Ooh, wow, okay, that was weird. Sorry about that, guys. I maybe should have muted my mic, but the sinuses were bothering me. All right, so as I was saying, Jared Cook, my number 7 tight end. We saw a little bit earlier that the Houston Texans gave up the second most points to the tight end position last year. Now, going into this season, you do not have Clowney. You got a couple pieces. You got a linebacker and a defensive end in that trade. But is there going to be enough to stop a guy like Jared Cook? I think Jared Cook's biggest weakness is the amount of times that the New Orleans Saints are going to throw the ball, plain and simple. Over the last couple of years, they have decreased the amount of passing attempts they have taken on a per-game basis by a pretty substantial margin. Like I've mentioned in the past, Drew Brees has thrown the ball 140 times less from 2016 to 2018 because they want to heavily incorporate their running game, take the ball out of this man's hand, and let a little bit of the pressure kind of slip off of his back and give it to the running backs like Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray. That being said, Michael Thomas is the number 1 target. The number 2 target on this team is Alvin Kamara. And number 3, plain and simple, is going to be Jared Cook into a great matchup. I love him this week as my number 7 tight end. Truly could be a top 3 by the end of the week. But on that Monday night game, it's really going to depend how many points are scored. If it ends up being a shootout, they want to use Jared Cook as a receiving target. Plain and simple. Jared Cook is not a blocking tight end. Even when you go back to the Raiders season last year, Jared Cook was awful blocking. You can go look at the Pro Football Focus statistics. He is not a blocking tight end. They are primarily using him as a receiving option, whether it's in the slot outside, as a tight end, on the line of scrimmage. He's going to be great. He's my number 7 this week. I have a lot of confidence in those top 7 guys. They should be fantastic. So, moving on to number 8. Again, these rankings, they're pretty much almost my identical rankings to drafting these guys this offseason. Vance McDonald playing against the tough defense of the Patriots. Now, the question is, similar to a guy like Jared Cook or O.J. Howard or Evan Engram, are these tight ends like Vance McDonald going to be given the ample opportunity to be the number 3 receiving option of their respective team? Like I've mentioned, O.J. Howard is just behind Godwin and Evans. Vance McDonald is just behind James Conner and Michael and Juju Smith-Schuster in terms of targets. I don't think that there's going to be an established number 2 receiver on this team. There could be, but I really do believe that Vance McDonald is going to be more incorporated in the passing game as a receiving option. They don't really need him to block, even though he has the capabilities of doing so. Vance McDonald, plain and simple, should be the number 3 receiving option of this team. I like him as my number 8 tight end of this week. As a receiving option, it's really going to be determined on how many targets he gets. I don't think he's getting 10 targets. But if he can manage to find himself 7, 8 targets a week and lock down 5, 6 of those passes for a good amount of yards, that's going to make a pretty big difference in terms of the tight end landscape because of how poor it is. Outside of those top prospects, man, we start to lose a little bit of value here when we get to the number 8 spot moving on. But either way, a lot of confidence in Vance McDonald. Doesn't have to share snaps with a guy like Jesse James going into this season. Jesse James is gone, so should be good going forward. Number 9, David Njoku, playing against one of the tougher matchups. When you get to play against the Tennessee Titans, and the Tennessee Titans are very stout against the tight end position. They gave up the second fewest amount of points to the tight end position last year. It's going to be tough, but I really do believe that David Njoku, yes, he's a tight end, but they're going to use him in wide receiver formations. This guy is a big 6'6" target, 230, 40 pounds. He's going to get up. He's going to be a great red zone target for this offense, a guy that could potentially hurt the value of the other receiving and rushing options of this team because we know how heavily Baker Mayfield likes to use him. Once Baker Mayfield became the starting quarterback, David Njoku's statistics went up. Absolutely. If you go, for those of you who looked at the draft kit or purchased it, you'll go and you'll 100% know and see David Njoku with Baker Mayfield because Baker Mayfield likes to target him so often. David Njoku was the second highest targeted receiver on the Browns last season. Let's not forget that. Sure, we get Odell Beckham into this offense, but there's a good chance that David Njoku could stay consistently on the upper end of the targets on this respective team. So he's my number 9 tight end. Even though it's a tough matchup, I really like the prospect of him this week. All right, moving on to number 10, another guy that missed the entirety of the 2018 season. He had an injury to his Achilles in week 1 after he caught a good amount of passes. He put up a good week, to be honest. But He unfortunately tore his Achilles. An older gentleman, Delanie Walker's been in the league for what, like 14 years? Like Vernon Davis status. I think they both played for the 49ers at one point at the same time, but let's be honest. Again, we're being honest out here, right? Let's be honest. Delanie Walker, plain and simple, is one of, if not the security blankets of Marcus Mariota. What we've seen in seasons prior, in the last 3 seasons that Delanie Walker played, it's 15, 16, 17. The guy was averaging 800 receiving yards, a handful of touchdowns, 60 some odd receptions. We know what Delanie Walker's capable of. If he's going to return to a similar role, he's going to be a fantastic tight end. He's going to be a top 8, 9, 10, but no, even closer, top 6 tight end by the end of the year. But I really think because of how many weapons they've acquired, you brought in A.J. Brown in the draft, you brought in Adam Humphries in free agency, you still have Corey Davis, now you have Delanie Walker, Dion Lewis, Derrick Henry. There are a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. I don't know if Delanie Walker is going to be able to consistently get as many as he used to in the past in terms of targets. So right now, going against the Browns, decent matchup. I like him as my number 10 tight end. He should be at least starting in your league if you play in a 10-team league, in my opinion. Moving on to my last 2 prospects this week at the tight end position. So we have Austin Hooper and we have Eric Ebron. Let's talk about Austin Hooper really quickly. Playing against a tougher matchup. You get to play against the the Minnesota Vikings, and really, I don't know how good the Atlanta Falcons are going to be this week. I think it's really going to be the biggest test on what kind of Falcons team we're going to see, because I have Matt Ryan lower. I have Julio Jones lower. Calvin Ridley's lower on my list. Devontae Freeman's lower on my list. Austin Hooper could end up being the lone hope of this team in terms of value because of how good and efficient he was last season. He's going to continue to see a lot of targets. We've seen Dirk Cutter, the new offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons in seasons prior, even with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, even in 2012 and 2013 when he was the offensive coordinator of the Falcons. We've seen him target the tight end position heavily. O.J. Howard last season, Tony Gonzalez when he was back with the Falcons a couple years back, 7 years ago. So Austin Hooper could be a vital part of this offense that a lot of people are missing out on. So top 12, not a big deal. The guy was the number 6 tight end at the end of the last season at half PPR. Yes, he might not be a sexy start or a great name that a lot of people know of, but Austin Hooper is a guy that I like at my number 11 spot. Moving on to the last tight end I want to talk about today. We're talking about Eric Ebron. Here's the thing about Eric Ebron. It really is going to depend on how good this offense is. And Jacoby Brissett is 100% dependent. I mean, listen, the thing is, the Colts offense is not changing. That's the plain, it's just plain and simple. They're not going to change the scheme because Andrew Luck's not gone. They're going to use their two tight end formation. They're going to pass the ball deep. They're going to use their brute of an offensive line to, impose their will on defenses with Marlon Mack. That's not going to change. This is going to be a high-scoring offense in terms of we got to throw the ball. But Jacoby Brissett has to be able to produce in the red zone, and that's where Eric Ebron finds all of his value. Eric Ebron had 14 touchdowns last season. I think he had 13 receiving, 1 rushing. Eric Ebron had so many touchdowns last season that he went from being a guy that people just could not stand to an all-pro, Pro Bowl tight end. That was the number, 4 tight end last season? It's very important that Eric Ebron finds value in the red zone. He's not just a tight end for this team. He's a receiving option, but there's also guys like Devin Funchess, Jack Doyle, T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, Nyheim Hines, and even Marlon Mack in that red zone that are going to potentially hurt his value. I like him because of the prospect of him just being a good receiving tight end in a team that loves to throw the ball to the tight end position. But touchdowns, that's going to be the most elusive thing, and that's why I have him lower on my list. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. If you liked today's video, these were the top 12 rankings at the tight end position. If you want my top 24 rankings, the Patreon is there for this week. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button. Click that like button. Much appreciated. Liking the videos just helps grow the channel, expand to newer audiences. So thank you very much for doing so. And until next time, hopefully you'll come out and join us today during the live stream. Much appreciated, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.